Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another ToscastsPodcast podcast between myself, Total OS Today from the United States, and Infinitely Galactic from Australia. Now, this is a series of podcasts. This one will be Toscasts number 7. If you haven't already, please check out the previous 6 podcasts between myself and IG. And be sure to also check out the Infinitely Galactic channel here on YouTube. And for more information, you can also check out the Total OS Today website and the new ToscastsPodcasts.blogspot.com website, where you will find all the podcasts on that particular website and, of course, here on the YouTube channel. And at this point, I would like to transfer the microphone to my good friend in Australia, Infinitely Galactic.
So hello again, everybody, and thank you for tuning in. It's obviously been a little while since we've done one of these Toscasts. And quick mention about the names. Obviously, we are tacking an S on the end now, as Toscast happens to be a trademark of Toshiba. So what are the odds of that happening? Either way, we're going to try to keep doing these podcasts, and we're hoping that we can at least get 2 of these up before the holiday season, where everyone gets crazy busy. So so basically today we're just going to be talking about the passing of Steve Jobs, as well as the passing of Dennis Ritchie. There seems to be a lot of famous technological figures that have passed in the last couple of months since we last talked, and also we're going to share some thoughts about the latest Ubuntu release, as the Ubuntu news seems to be coming on thick and fast at this stage.
Yes. Let's get started with, if I may, let's get started with the life of Dennis Ritchie. I had received a message, something to the effect that, it's not fair we have all this talk about Steve Jobs and nothing about Dennis Ritchie. I totally agree. Honestly, I did not know that Dennis Ritchie had passed away. It went kind of underneath the radar, or at least underneath my radar, and it could be possibly because maybe the life of Dennis Ritchie was not as glamorous per se as Steve Jobs, but nonetheless, I believe that the life of the accomplishments of Dennis Ritchie were just as important, if not more important, than the accomplishments and the life of Steve Jobs. And it can be argued that if there was no Dennis Ritchie, there may not have been a Steve Jobs or the accomplishments of Steve Jobs. Of course, Dennis Ritchie, the father of the C programming language, and I believe he was the co-founder of Unix. And isn't Linux based on Unix? And if there wasn't Dennis Ritchie, who knows where technology would have progressed today. So definitely, there should be equal attention, in my opinion, to what Dennis Ritchie accomplished in his lifetime. And once again, if it wasn't for Dennis Ritchie, there may not have been the accomplishments of Steve Jobs. So to that viewer who sent me that email, I forget who it is, but you know who you are. Thank you for pointing it out. I apologize. I should have mentioned, or I should have known, that he had passed away. And yes, Dennis Ritchie's life was just as important, if not more important, to the computer technology world. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had heard the name Dennis Ritchie thrown around a few times, but because of the fact that this guy was responsible for so many of the core frameworks that a lot of our technology nowadays, computing technology, is built off, you just don't hear about his name as much as you do the glamorous faces like Steve Jobs and those who are making
Right.
oodles of money.
Sure.
So, I mean, I've just been looking at the Wikipedia page
Yeah.
recently and sort of getting myself familiar with his accomplishments, and it is really amazing. He got awarded a National Medal of Technology in 1999,
Yeah.
and he's won all sorts of other different awards for his programming abilities and for the achievements that he has passed on in his life. So it's
Yeah.
he's quite an amazing, it's amazing that these contributors of technology who are really responsible for a lot of the core stuff, the stuff that we all kind of take for granted, and we use these tools, and we don't really give much thought to who actually created them, who actually sort of made them, because these things are the kind of things that are made from scratch. They're not just built on
Yes.
top of something. It's not like a nice designer product that's, or like Ubuntu or like Mac
Yeah.
OS 10 or Windows that is just built off core technologies. It is the core stuff. This is what the industry uses and
Yes.
utilizes to create all its products. So, yeah, I mean, major props to him. His life, he had a lot of amazing accomplishments, and I mean,
Ab-
really, he
yeah.
did well for himself. He
Absolutely.
died at age 70, so he
Yes.
he lived a good full life.
Completely, totally agree. If I mean, once again, if not for Dennis Ritchie, where would Steve Jobs be? Not to take anything away from Steve Jobs because he was a visionary, in himself, in terms of what he saw for, a vision for the technology future. But I will stand with what I said from what I read about the life of Dennis Ritchie. If not for Dennis Ritchie, what would have became of Steve Jobs? But to that person who sent me that message, I totally agree. So to the Dennis Ritchie family, my condolences, of course, and to all of you who were upset that I should have known that Dennis Ritchie passed away. I'm sorry, but anyway. Let's continue with the topic and let's talk a little bit about Steve Jobs. When I think of Steve Jobs, another name that comes to mind is the name of Gene Roddenberry. Now, Gene was the original creator of the original Star Trek TV series, and like Gene, Steve Jobs was a visionary who foresaw a different vision of the future. Now, back in the '60s, when Gene created Star Trek, Gene was years ahead of his time. You look at the old TV series, and pretty much a lot of it has come to life. In the original series, you had the talking computer, the computer discs, the walkie-talkies, which are now cell phones. The character of Mr. Spock with that little silver thing stuck in his ear. Well, that's now a Bluetooth. Gene was a visionary, and Steve Jobs was a visionary. And look, he was a genius. To put to not downplay what Dennis Ritchie contributed, Steve Jobs built on that technology, and really, Steve Jobs, to me, he took what was uh, what was thought of as science fiction and turned it into a reality, turned it into science fact. He took technology, he took nerdy, geeky technology, and made it accessible to the masses, just like you and I, with the iPads and iPhones, smartphones, so on and so forth. So I don't know where Apple goes from here. I don't think there will be another person like Steve Jobs, or maybe, who knows, maybe there will be someone better. That remains to be seen. But a couple of notes. His book, I believe, is a bestseller, or the biography. Steve Jobs is now a bestseller. I was able to read a couple, or I heard a couple excerpts from it. And from what I understand, when Steve Jobs heard that Google was coming out with their version of an iPhone or a smartphone, apparently Steve Jobs was absolutely furious. I believe he was stated as saying that Google was stealing the iPhone, and according to the story, Steve Jobs was willing to go thermonuclear war against Google and sue them for everything they had. Now, that did not happen, but just I think that goes to show just how passionate Steve Jobs was about his products and his vision of the future. But I have not purchased the book. I'm sure it is a good read, but there you go, Steve Jobs, and some insight as to what he thought of his competitors. Have you heard of that story?
Yes, I have, as well as thoughts on Microsoft and Facebook and different companies like that. Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I think of Steve Jobs, it's very much a case of he was definitely the undisputed captain of the Apple ship, and as far as the Apple ship is concerned, it was sinking very badly
Yes.
when he returned to the company. We've talked about this before. He brought a whole new vision to the company, and really it's his sort of what's the word? It's his cross pollination from different influences that he's had over the years, like his time with Pixar. He was a member of the Walt Disney Company, and all of his different experiences with consumers and marketing, I think really turned him from just a technology visionary to somebody who could actually bring this technology down and put it in the hands of consumers and make it so accessible and so desirable that
Yes.
that it has revolutionized a lot of what the technology industry is today. Tablets would not have existed, like they did exist, but not in the form that people were interested in up until 2010 when the original iPad came out. Smartphones became something for everyone once the iPhone came out, and consequently, competitors like Android soon surfaced because they saw the opportunity there. And now they're reckoning that the sort of the next big trend is ultra portables. So
Hmm.
basically, most laptops coming in the form of MacBook Airs, sort of thing, where they're very
Right.
thin, they're very light, but they're very powerful. Technology is moving that way, so why not?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, look, if not for Steve Jobs, if he had not created these products, probably somebody else would have eventually. But I think Steve probably jump started, speeded up the process of bringing these, Star Trek type products, to the consumer masses. So yes, a lot of credit has to go to Steve. He was a genius. He was passionate. Love him or hate him. I never had a chance to meet him, but one cannot argue that he knew how to push the right buttons to get things done. And as far as his products go, he was three for three, between the first, of course, the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad. And as far as where Apple goes from here, I personally think that probably Apple is going to be okay. They're going to have to obviously come out with products for the future, something that keeps pace with what consumers want. And whether there is a replacement for the brilliance of Steve Jobs or maybe someone better, that remains to be seen. But I think probably in the long run, Apple is going to be okay. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
thing
yeah,
is that Apple as a company, it is a corporation. It is a big company. And I think Steve, he built quite an incredible crew around him. He can't make the world turn around himself. So he had to have a group of fantastic people behind him. And from what I've heard, the selection process of people involved in the company is very stringent. And in the past, there have been, some pretty radical restrictions on what kind of people are allowed to work at Apple and the kind of lifestyle they have to live, as far as keeping company secrets secret and all that sort of stuff. But honestly, I think so. I think is it Tim Cook or something like that.
yeah.
I could be getting that wrong, but either way, I think the company's still in good hands. From what I've heard, there's still a product plan that Steve Jobs had for the next 5 years or so.
I think,
So they'll
yeah.
probably keep plowing through those. But it'll be interesting to see where they go from there as far as actual, next visionary moves, not just slight innovations on what they've already got. So it'll be interesting to see what the next big thing is from Apple. But at this stage, I think they're in good hands, and I think the company also is. I think it's the company's kind of looking to open up a bit. I think Steve Jobs had a bit of a what's the word? He had a few personal issues, I
Right.
think, that transferred over into his corporate dealings. So I think just from the news that I've read, Apple as a company has started to open up a bit, starting to be a bit nicer to its employees,
Yes.
and letting their hair down a bit. Now that the captain has gone, no disrespect intended, but yeah,
Right.
I think the company is in for some interesting times, and it'll be interesting to see how people see them in 5 years' time.
Well, there's certainly a lot of consumers and a lot of fans of Apple are curious to see what type of products will be coming out of the Apple ship in the future. I'm certainly curious, just I'm sure as a lot of people are. Well, I think before we move on to the topic of Ubuntu, the latest release, I just wanted to say at this time, yes, both Dennis Ritchie and Steve Jobs, my condolences to both families. They both contributed a lot to the future of computer technology, and it could be argued that what Dennis Ritchie did may have been more important than what Steve Jobs um, contributed to the technology world. But to both those folks, those both Dennis and Steve, may they rest in peace. And IG, unless you have something else to add, maybe we should just move on.
Yeah, sure. I mirror what you've said. So after time of reflection, it's time to push forward to the future.
Okay, well, let's now switch gears and talk about everybody's favorite Linux-based operating system, Ubuntu with the Unity. Okay, well, maybe not. Well, as you know, Ubuntu Unity 11.0, no, 11.10, I believe. Yes, 11.10 was released not too long ago on Nyric Ocelot. Now, I was able to download it and run it in a virtual machine not long. I would say about an hour or less. And my first thoughts was I thought it looked even better than the previous incarnation of Unity. The time that I ran it in a virtual machine, it was stable. It did not crash. Now, when I posted the video review of what I saw, immediately there were two comments stating that there were already two bugs in it. And I suppose that's a common occurrence now with Ubuntu or with many based Linux operating systems where you have a 6-month release cycle. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe you may have different thoughts, but I don't know. Maybe it seems that maybe the 6-month cycle is just too fast to come out with a completely polished or completely bug-free, or as possible, a bug-free product. I think Oniric looks terrific. I thought about installing it in my laptop to replace the previous 11.04, but to be honest, 11.04 for me has been just about as, maybe not flawless, but just about as great an operating system based on Ubuntu as I've had, and I'm kind of afraid to delete it and install 11.10 for fear of the same bugs or different bugs. Now that may be an unfair statement, but my initial thoughts, it was definitely an improvement. And the one thing that stuck out, the new software center, I thought looks terrific. I mean, nice eye candy, pleasant to use, easy to look at. Now that was definitely a step in the right direction. As far as the rest of it, the transparency effect and all that, that's fine. I didn't see any major upgrades from the previous 11.04 unless I missed something. Can you maybe expand on that?
Yeah, basically, I mean, in my opinion, Ubuntu 11.10 was, well, basically on the core, it adopted GNOME 3. So all
Oh,
the GTK3 libraries, basically now it's running GNOME 3, which you can easily run GNOME Shell as well, which is the GNOME 3 default. But then
okay,
they just slapped their own Unity on top of that. Previously, Ubuntu 11.04 was GNOME 2. So any bugs that GNOME 2 had, therefore Ubuntu 11.04 had. That means with 11.10 and GNOME 3, there are kind of a whole sort of range of different issues that you may have with GNOME 3.
okay,
But Unity as a component on top of that is quite polished. The design of 11.10 is fantastic. I mean, I reckon the design work that they've done in Ubuntu in this previous release cycle is unparalleled. They've done so much work and so much effort into this Unity interface, and it really is starting to look slick. And I think a lot of people who were seriously bagging on the previous release
hmm
are starting to understand where Ubuntu is wanting to go with Unity, and they're starting to click with it. Having
okay,
said that, the core system itself, still needs a lot of polish. And your comment about the 6 months release cycle, I agree with it in the point that it's very hard to produce a really stable, bug-free, very fast, and just a solid package in 6 months.
yeah,
It's just not that easy to do because
yes,
everything updates so quickly in the Linux world. Applications are constantly moving forward, and really that's fantastic. But
yeah,
I think if people want to have a stable operating system, they really need to put their calendar markers on the long-term support releases.
Right.
So the next Ubuntu release 12.04 is going to be a long-term support. It's going to be supported for 5 years as opposed to 3 years that it usually is.
Okay.
Um, so usually Ubuntu releases are supported, I think, for 1.5 years.
Okay.
Long-term support used to be supported for 3 years. This time they're going to be supporting it for 5 years, simply because they want this one to be so polished and so stable that they want, to roll this out on enterprise systems, and they're going to have governments running this system. They want it to be pretty much as perfect as they can. So it'll
Okay.
be that'll be the one that I'll really, when it comes out, that'll be the one that I'm going to be knocking the hardest on. If it doesn't live up to, expectations to be that solid, stable operating system that needs to showcase everything that Linux has to offer in a very well designed interface, then I'm going to be giving it a pretty bad rap. But if it does pull it off, then I'll be very impressed. Basically, the last couple release cycles, they've just been working on the design, working on Unity, trying to develop this shell to work in, trying to develop all these fantastic little eye candy things.
Yes.
This release cycle, they're working on spit and polish. They've just got to get this system down to where it's stable, it works like a dream. Hardware support needs to be there.
Yes.
Um, Really, they've got to make it work on as many systems as they possibly can. So this next 6 months is just going to be pretty much spit and polish with minimal feature upgrades.
So it's safe to assume then that you would recommend to a Windows user wait for the next LTS release to try dual booting between Windows and Ubuntu?
I would definitely, I mean, if they wanted to give Ubuntu a go, definitely feel free to go and try 11.10. I have not come across any glaring issues that the everyday user is going to come across. It is very
Okay.
polished, it's very stable, but there are niggles here and there, and it just
Okay.
not so much on the design level, not so much the stuff you see, but it's the stuff that you don't see. Then that would be very confusing when a system error comes up, or not that I've
Yeah.
actually experienced one, but
Yeah.
when just those little things go wrong on the, underneath the hood, more or less,
Okay.
that's when it gets a bit concerning, as opposed to, like just an application crash or something like that. You can
Right.
deal with that, but it's
Okay.
when the system does funny things that
Right.
that it can be a bit disconcerting.
Right.
So yes, I mean, really, if anybody wants to use, Ubuntu and stand on it and say this thing is never going to fail, definitely the long-term support releases are going to be the most trouble-free releases that you're going to have. So yeah, I would definitely put the calendar mark on 12.04 when it comes out. But if you enjoy the whole Unity experience, 11.10 is working pretty well.
Okay, I will probably have to echo the same statements as you said. Like I said, with me with 11.04, I haven't not had any issues. But yeah, Windows users out there, definitely give Unity a try. As a Windows dual booter myself, I just think it looks, as you said, it looks slick. And before we move on and end this, just a little side note here. Check out the Linux Mint blog. There is an update on Linux Mint 12, and they are going to try combine. There is a screenshot. They are going to combine the GNOME 2.32 and the GNOME 3, combine the features of both and try to make it as a seamless, painless transition for someone who's used to the old GNOME type of desktop interface. So I caught that today briefly on the news. So for those users out there who follow my channel, I also recommend Linux Mint. You may want to check that out. I just thought I would throw that in if you're not crazy about Unity. But that's really all I had to say about Ubuntu with Unity. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, that's about it really. I mean, as of right now, I'm actually using Ubuntu, so the XFC variant.
Okay.
I mean, I've spent a lot of time over the past couple of months with GNOME 3 and Unity, and I was just kind of getting a bit tired of just some lagginess issues sometimes, and so I was like, oh well, I'm just going to try something lightweight and run with it. And yeah, there's no sitting around with XFC. You click and launch things and they open in a snap and you're not sitting around at all. So the speed of it is very nice.
Oh yeah, I have messed with Ubuntu before. In fact, in my the older ThinkPad, one of my ThinkPad laptops, I have a lightweight. I have Ubuntu. 1010 on it, I think. I didn't feel like changing it. I mean, it just zips, it flies. So I figured, what the heck, I'll just keep it on there and not change it. But yeah, definitely check out the various, you know, variations of the Ubuntu family, and let us know what you guys think. Well,
Hmm.
at this time, I think we should probably wrap it up, unless you have something else to say, IG.
Concluding thoughts essentially that it's great to see diversification when it comes to operating systems. Each operating system seems to be going with its own little custom interface. So we got Mint doing its own thing, Ubuntu doing its own thing, Fedora and OpenSUSE are sticking with almost, vanilla stock GNOME or KDE experiences. But it's good to see a bit of diversification because a year ago everyone was doing practically the same thing. So this is good to see. It gives users choice, and it makes sense to have choice this time, not just why do we have Ubuntu? Why do we have Mint? Why do we have, OpenSUSE or Fedora when they all do the same thing? So it's good to see diversification, and it gives users choice, and that's what Linux is all about.
So there you go, Windows users. You have choices, and it doesn't have to cost you a single penny. So there you go. Okay, well, thank you so much, as always, for listening to another ToscastsPodcast podcast between myself, Total OS Today from the United States, and of course, Infinitely Galactic from Australia. We are always taking comments and/or suggestions for any future topics that you may want us to talk about. Feel free to drop me a line or IG a line. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, I know I will catch you always sometime in the future. And from Australia,
And I will indeed catch all of you sometime in the future as well. And if you do have any comments, you can feel free to leave them on the YouTube page, or you can follow me on Twitter at InGalactic. So you can catch me pretty much anytime, and I'll usually respond to comments and questions if they are indeed nice comments. So anyway, thank you all for listening again, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.
thank you all. Ciao. Bye.